A 1951 Vincent Black Lightning just sold for $929,000. That's a bike you could have bought new for less than the price of a used car. Today we're breaking down why old motorcycles, the ones sitting under a tarp in your garage right now, are suddenly worth more than most people's houses. Stick around, because number one might change how you look at your own garage forever. This isn't guesswork. This breakdown is based on auction data from Bonhams and Meckham, valuation tracking from Haggerty, and collector market reporting from RevZilla and Forbes. Here's the reframe before we start counting down. This isn't a bubble, and it's not random speculation. It's the collision of three separate forces happening at exactly the same time: an aging generation with real disposable income and a specific itch to buy back its youth, a shrinking supply of bikes that can never physically be replaced because the factories or the regulations that allowed them no longer exist, and a global buyer pool bidding through online platforms that simply didn't exist 20 years ago. Haggerty itself has tracked demand for vintage motorcycles rising more than 50% since 2010 alone. Let's count down the machines proving it, from number 10 to the one entry that ties every single other one together. Number 10, the Honda CB750 Sandcast. In 1969, Honda built the first few thousand CB750s using Sandcast engine cases before switching to cheaper die-cast production for every unit after. At the time, nobody cared. It was a manufacturing detail, not a selling point. Now those early Sandcast engine numbers are the single biggest value multiplier in the entire Honda collector world, and the further down the production run you go, the higher the price climbs. One CB750 prototype, a pre-production test bike, essentially a factory mule that should have been scrapped once testing wrapped, sold for a record-breaking $200,000. Standard Sandcast production bikes in good condition now regularly clear 5 figures, sometimes deep into them, according to collector market reporting, and unrestored, all original examples with matching frame and engine numbers command a real premium over anything that's been touched by a restorer. Here's the plain language version of why. The CB750 basically invented the modern superbike category overnight. 4 cylinders, a hydraulic disc brake, an electric start, all in one affordable package in 1969, at a time when British twins were still leaking oil onto driveways and kickstarting was the norm. It made every British and American bike on the showroom floor look like it belonged in a museum. The irony is that it now belongs in one, and it's worth more than most new bikes on the market today. The timeline tells the story on its own. In the 1980s and 90s, Sandcast CB750s were treated as used commuter bikes, cheap, plentiful, disposable. By the 2030s, collectors started separating Sandcast frame numbers from later production runs. By the 2020s, that separation turned into a genuine price cliff between Sandcast and everything after, and it hasn't leveled off since. Forum sentiment backs this up directly. Owners on vintage Honda boards describe getting unsolicited offers on bikes they never intended to sell, sometimes double what they paid 5 years earlier, often from buyers who never even asked to see the bike run before naming a number. Number 9. The Kawasaki Z1. The Kawasaki Z1 was Kawasaki's direct answer to the CB750. Bigger displacement, a double overhead cam engine when nobody expected one from Kawasaki, and built specifically to embarrass Honda on the street. It worked. A clean, Condition 1 Z1 from 1973 is now valued around $35,000, based on current vintage price guide data, and that's before you factor in any factory racing history or documented low mileage, both of which push individual examples well past guide value at auction. Translate that number into something you can actually feel. This is a bike that sold for roughly $1,900 brand new in 1973. Adjusted for inflation, that's maybe $13,000 in today's money. It has appreciated well beyond inflation, meaning it's not just holding value, it's outrunning the dollar itself, the same way a well-chosen stock outruns a savings account. What's driving it isn't just performance on paper, it's timing. The Z1 landed at the exact moment Japanese manufacturers proved, once and for all, that they could out-engineer anyone in the world, British and American brands included. That moment, the one where an entire industry's pecking order flips, only happens once. You can't manufacture that kind of historical weight into a new bike no matter how much chrome you bolt on or how much marketing budget you throw at a heritage model. Z1 owner communities describe a similar pattern to the CB750 crowd. Bikes that sat in barns for 20 years are suddenly worth restoring properly instead of parting out, because the math on a full restoration finally pencils out against what a finished bike can fetch. Number 8. Two-stroke sport bikes. Bikes like the Yamaha RZ350, the RD350, and small 16er special two-strokes represent something that flat-out cannot legally exist anymore in most of the world. A smoky, high-revving, oil-burning street bike. Emissions regulations killed the two-stroke street engine decades ago, which means the supply of these machines is permanently frozen at whatever survived. No factory anywhere is ever building a new one for road use. That scarcity shows up directly in price, and not gradually. It's accelerated hard in the last decade. Small commuter two-strokes that used to be considered disposable teenager bikes, the kind bought for a few $100s and ridden into the ground, have in some cases doubled in price over just the past 10 years and are now reaching into the thousands for clean examples, according to collector market coverage. Larger performance two-strokes have followed the same curve. Here's the timeline in plain terms. From the 1970s through the 1990s, these were considered throwaway bikes, cheap, common, and ragged around by teenagers with L-plates who then scrapped them the moment something broke. That's exactly why so few good ones survive today, and survival rate is the whole ballgame in this market. Parts for them, pistons, reed valves, expansion chambers, even head gaskets, are becoming genuinely hard to source, which pushes prices on good original examples even higher every single year. Riders on two-stroke specific forums describe cannibalizing multiple parts bikes just to keep one runner alive, buying entire donor motorcycles solely for one component. That's not really a hobby at that point. That's triage. And triage-level scarcity is exactly what drives collector prices through the roof, because every parts bike that gets cannibalized removes another complete motorcycle from the total surviving count, permanently. Number 7. Homologation specials. A homologation special is a street bike built purely so a manufacturer could legally race a similar version on the track under production-based racing rules. Small production runs, race-derived parts straight off the factory floor, and, critically, they were never designed with daily commuting in mind. That combination is collector catnip, every single time. Bikes from this category are increasingly described by insurance and collector guides as the new blue-chip tier of the market, with early 2000s superbikes now being treated the same way 70s icons were treated a decade ago. Think early Ducati 1199 Panigales, first-generation BMW S1000RRs in their launch colors, and homologation-specific race replicas from Honda and Kawasaki with documented Isle of Man TT or Grand Prix racing history attached, the kind of provenance that alone has been described as adding tens of thousands of pounds to a single bike's hammer price at a major auction house. The pattern repeats itself with total predictability across every era. The bikes that were built in the smallest numbers for the most specific racing purpose age into the highest values. It happened with British race bikes in the 60s, with Japanese superbikes in the 80s and 90s, and now the exact same math is playing out with bikes from the 2000s and 2010s. Bikes plenty of riders watching this video actually remember buying new off a showroom floor. The plain language stakes for anyone holding one of these: if you own a low-mileage, unmodified homologation special from the 20,000s sitting in a garage right now, you are very likely holding an appreciating asset, not a depreciating one. That inverts almost everything people assume about buying a motorcycle, that it loses value the second you ride it off the lot. Sport bike forum sentiment on this has shifted noticeably in the last few years too. Owners who once modified these bikes without a second thought, swapping exhausts, deleting emissions equipment, changing bodywork, are now being warned off by other collectors, because every modification chips away at the matching numbers unmolested status that drives the top dollar sales. Number 6. The Honda CB350 and CL350 with Golden Dragon kits. This entry is proof that value isn't always about the bike itself. Sometimes it's about a factory-installed accessory kit that almost nobody paid attention to at the time. Honda's Golden Dragon Performance Package, bolted onto small displacement CB350 and CL350 models, has turned ordinary commuter bikes into five-figure auction stars. At Meckham's 2026 Las Vegas sale, two Golden Dragon-equipped examples sold for $44,000 and $49,500, and auction reporting notes that trend shows zero signs of cooling off. Let that sink in for a second. These were mid-size beginner bikes. When new, the kind of motorcycle a dealership sold to a 19-year-old with a starter budget. Nothing special on paper. Nothing that would have made a 1970s buyer think twice. But because a factory kit was rare, well-documented, and bolted onto an otherwise mass-produced platform, the value multiplied several times over compared to a completely standard, kit-free model of the exact same year. A standard CB350 in good condition might trade hands for a few $1,000s. The same bike with a documented, verifiable Golden Dragon kit is worth 10 times that or more. Same frame, same engine block, same year off the same assembly line. The only difference is a bolt-on option most original buyers never even knew existed. That's the lesson buried in this entry, and it applies well beyond Honda. Rarity of configuration matters just as much as rarity of model. Two visually similar bikes, decades apart in value, simply because one has a factory part the other doesn't, and because someone, somewhere, kept the paperwork to prove it. Number 5. British Twins. Triumph, Norton, BSA. British twins from the 50s through the 70s have been described by collector market analysts as rising steadily for over a decade. Through the Great Recession, through the real estate bust that followed it, through the slow economic recovery afterward, and through wide swings in nearly every other asset class you can name. Norton specifically has been singled out as appreciating steadily year over year, and specific race-bred models like the Norton 500T Trials machine have been described as some of the finest factory bikes of their kind ever produced, which keeps demand for surviving examples consistently strong. Here's what makes this segment genuinely different from the Japanese bikes higher on this list. British twins carry a kind of generational inheritance value that goes beyond straightforward collector nostalgia. Buyers aren't always chasing the thrill of riding one themselves. Sometimes they're chasing a father's or a grandfather's bike, something with real family weight attached to it. That emotional premium is nearly impossible to put a clean number on, but auction houses will tell you it's absolutely real, because documented ownership history, knowing exactly whose garage a bike sat in for 50 years, can add tens of thousands of dollars to a final sale price all on its own. Owner forums for British marques are full of multi-year restoration project threads where people openly admit they'll spend more restoring a bike than they'll ever recoup selling it. And they say it without regret, because for that crowd, the return was never meant to be financial. But for the buyers circling the same bikes at auction with a paddle in hand, it very much is. And that gap between sentimental owners and calculating buyers is exactly what keeps this segment of the market churning. Number 4. The Vincent Black Shadow and Rapide. A 1937 Vincent HRD Series A Rapide carried a pre-auction estimate of $180,000 to $240,000 at a recent Bonham sale, and the auction house's own international director called it genuine value at that estimate, meaning even at nearly $250,000, insiders think the bike is still underpriced relative to where the market is heading. That's not a typo, and it's not even close to the top of the Vincent hierarchy. To put that price movement in context, one particular Vincent Rapide was valued 4 years earlier at $270,000 to $300,000 and had previously changed hands at roughly $327,000, before settling back to the current estimate. A reminder that even the priciest end of this market isn't a straight line upward, it's a real market with real fluctuation, just one trending firmly up over any multi-year window. Vincent motorcycles occupy a strange, almost unrepeatable space in the collector world, built in genuinely tiny numbers, engineered years ahead of their time, and, critically, the company that made them collapsed and shut its doors decades ago. There's no just order a new one from the manufacturer. Every surviving Vincent is part of a finite, permanently shrinking pool, and the buyers competing for them come from as far away as the Middle East and the Far East, according to auction house reporting. Collectors who, 20 years ago, would never have shown up to bid on a British motorcycle at all. The stakes for anyone chasing this era of bike are simple but sobering. You're not just competing with other American collectors anymore. You're competing globally for a supply that only ever goes down, never up, against buyers who have both the money and the motivation to keep pushing the number higher. Number 3. The Vincent Black Lightning. This gets its own entry, separate from the rest of the Vincent lineup, because the number is too wild to bury inside another item. In January, a 1951 Vincent Black Lightning sold for $929,000, becoming at the time the most valuable motorcycle ever sold at auction, full stop, beating out bikes with decades more marketing and mythology behind them. Adjusted for inflation, that's a 4,475% increase over its original value. Read that stat twice. 4,475%. Not doubled, not tripled. Multiplied by roughly 45 times what it would be worth if it had simply kept pace with inflation and nothing else. For comparison, most safe long-term investments over that same span, index funds, real estate in a strong market, would be lucky to multiply 5 or 6 times over. This bike multiplied 45 times. Only a handful of Black Lightnings were ever built, each one a factory-tuned, race-bred variant of the standard Black Shadow, and surviving examples with verified racing history are treated less like used vehicles and more like fine art with an engine bolted in. Bonham's own international director has said flatly that knowing what we know now, it would be worth stepping back in time just to buy these machines while they were still considered affordable. That's an auction house executive publicly admitting the market got the price historically wrong, and it will never get the chance to correct itself, because there will never be more 1951 Vincent Black Lightnings built, ever, under any circumstances. Number 2. The Crocker. If the Vincent proves what rarity plus performance can do to a price tag, the Crocker proves what rarity plus performance plus pure mythology can do. Every Crocker was built to order in impossibly small numbers out of a small shop in 1930s California, and every single one came with a factory guarantee, in writing, on paper, handed to the buyer, that it would outrun a Harley-Davidson or an Indian on the street. That's not marketing spin from a modern brand trying to sound edgy for a YouTube ad. That's an actual promise stamped into American motorcycle history nearly a century ago, and it happened to be true. Examples have sold at auction for $350,000. A 1936 Crocker small tank, even in what collectors bluntly call basket case condition, meaning disassembled, incomplete, missing major components, nowhere close to running, has still been valued at $100,000. Rarity, celebrity ownership history, and a documented factory guarantee combine to push these numbers into territory that has nothing to do with how the bike actually performs today and everything to do with what it represents. Translate that into plain terms so it actually lands. A Crocker in pieces, missing parts, incapable of being ridden, is worth more than most fully restored, fully running motorcycles from almost any other era in history. That's not really a bike in the conventional sense anymore. That's a piece of certified American manufacturing folklore, with 2 wheels attached, and certified folklore simply doesn't depreciate the way ordinary machinery does. Number 1. It's not about the bikes, it's about what's disappearing. Here's the part nobody in the vintage motorcycle world wants to say out loud, because it sounds a little dark. This entire market is being fueled by a generation that's running out of time. More than a quarter of the US population is over the age of 55. A huge number of them have paid off their homes, put their kids through school, and now have real disposable income and a very specific itch, buying back a piece of their childhood. It's the same instinct that turned old toys and sneakers into a resale economy. Except here, the toy is a $15,000 motorcycle instead of a $200 action figure. But that's only half the story, and it's the smaller half. The bigger half is supply, and supply on these bikes is not just limited, it's permanently frozen and actively shrinking. Every single motorcycle on this list, the CB750, the Z1, the two-strokes, the Vincents, the Crockers, shares one trait: nobody is building more of them. Ever. Emissions law killed the two-stroke street engine outright. The factories that built the Vincent and the Crocker don't exist anymore. Every crash, every part scavenged off a donor bike to keep another one running, every motorcycle that gets parted out for its carburetor or its gas tank permanently shrinks the remaining pool. Collector chatter even points to something as basic as a set of vintage gas tanks pulling 5 figures on their own, because the tanks themselves have become the scarce resource, not just the complete bike. Layer onto that the fact that the internet turned this from a regional hobby into a global bidding war. 20 years ago, you were negotiating with the guy 3 towns over who found a barn bike. Now, a Vincent listed in England is being chased by bidders from 35 countries, and a plundered from Japan 80s superbike is being fought over by European and American collectors trying to bring it home. You're not haggling with your neighbor anymore. You're in a global auction room whether you like it or not. And here's the twist that should worry every rider watching this. Not just the collectors chasing 6-figure auction lots. Some of the very things that make these old bikes irreplaceable. No computer-controlled engine management locking you out of your own tune, simple carburetors any home mechanic can rebuild on a kitchen table, parts you can source, machine, or fabricate yourself if a supplier disappears, are the same freedoms newer motorcycles are actively losing, one model year at a time. The old bikes on this list are appreciating in part because they're some of the last motorcycles a regular person can fully own, fully fix, and fully modify without asking a manufacturer's software for permission first. That's not just nostalgia talking. That's leverage. Real practical ownership leverage. And it's quietly disappearing from every new motorcycle rolling off a modern assembly line. It also explains why the buyer profile keeps shifting even as the prices climb. The nostalgia curve that collector market analysts talk about isn't standing still. It's a rolling wave. A decade ago, it was almost entirely 60s and 70s British and Japanese iron. Today, it's already pulling in 80s, 90s, and even 20,000s machines, because the next generation of buyers aging into disposable income grew up wanting those bikes instead. In another 10 years, the same forces on this list will be driving up prices on motorcycles some of you are riding home from the dealership right this year. This isn't a one-time event tied to one generation. It's a permanent mechanism that just keeps rolling forward onto whatever generation comes next. So when baby boomers eventually stop buying, and eventually they will, some analysts have already floated the idea that this could soften prices at the very bottom of the market, on the most common, least remarkable old bikes. Don't expect the top end to follow that softening down. The genuinely rare stuff, the Vincents, the Crockers, the Sandcast Hondas, isn't waiting on one single generation's nostalgia to stay valuable. It's protected by something nostalgia can't fake and money can't manufacture. It simply can't be built again, by anyone, under any circumstances, ever. Tie all 10 entries together and one theme runs through every single one. Age alone was never the thing that made these bikes valuable. A CB750 sat in driveways for decades before anyone treated the Sandcast ones differently. A Vincent Black Lightning sat undervalued for decades before a buyer with the right combination of money and obsession finally paid what it was actually worth. Value on this list isn't a function of time passing. It's a function of scarcity finally catching up with demand, all at once, after decades of nobody noticing. And once that catch-up happens on a given model, it doesn't reverse. Nobody discovers a warehouse of unbuilt 1951 Vincent Black Lightnings. The count of surviving examples only ever goes down from here, for every single bike on this list, forever. That's genuinely worth sitting with if you've got something old sitting under a cover in your own garage right now. It might not be a Crocker. It's probably not a Vincent. But if it's original, if it's documented, and if it belongs to a category the industry can legally no longer build, a two-stroke, an air-cooled 4 with a factory kit, an early homologation special, you may be sitting on something worth a lot more than you assumed the last time you thought about selling it. So, if the old bikes are the last ones you can actually own outright, fix, modify, and keep running on your own terms, you need to see what's happening to that freedom on new motorcycles right now. Check out why you're about to lose the right to repair your own motorcycle next, because the same forces making your old bike priceless are the ones locking new riders out of their own garages.